The Powers Project.
Stu, how you doing today, sir?
Well, I am doing very well sitting here in a beautiful San Diego weather. Uh, we even have air conditioning on here for the second time this summer. So it's pretty hot here. It's maybe 80 degrees.
Wow. I know it's more expensive, at least the housing in California and probably even San Diego, especially. It's much higher than it is here in Florida. But I wonder if I would save the money in paying more in housing there and save it in the air conditioning, because my air conditioning bill goes through the roof. And not only we used it more than twice, we've used it the entire year so far practically.
Oh,
So that's how
well,
hot and humid it is here all the time.
it's interesting for us. We use very little heat in the winter. Some mornings, my husband and I will turn up the temperature a few degrees just in the morning for an hour or two, and that's it. And then in the summer, like I just mentioned, today's the second time we're using it, and we're happy to have it most of the year. You just don't need heat or air conditioning here.
So San Diego, and I don't want to get into the whole thing because that's not what our podcast is about. But I have a friend who lives out in uh, not Beverly Hills, but out in that area, where it's like 113 degrees or something. It's crazy.
Well, well, there are certainly areas inland from where we are, but fortunately, we're pretty close to the ocean. So
Wow.
we get the ocean breezes, and it's just amazing. It's almost like every mile you move inland, the temperature goes up 1 or 2 degrees.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, that makes sense then. Well, if I ever move to California, then I'll have to look at San Diego. So the reason you're on the show today, I want to let everybody know that Stu is an author, not a new author, but a new author to fictional writing, and you just wrote a book, and that book is called Lights On, Clothes Off. It's What is the second part of it?
And the
It's
second part is
Confession.
Confessions of an Unabashed Exhibitionist.
There you go, and appropriately dressed today. so,
Yes.
so um, so I want to give people just a little bit of background. So you're a university professor that you were a university professor for 35 years. You retired quite a while
That's
ago.
correct.
And you do have, like I mentioned, writing accomplishments, which include 4 college textbooks, 39 journal articles, and 20 workbooks and learning kits for high school students. And this is your very first foray into fiction. So how did that come about? What made you decide, and what made you decide on the topic of being about exhibitionist?
Well, that's a great question. I was already comfortable writing, but all of my writing has been strict nonfiction. And I just thought a couple of years ago, I might have a story to tell that's very different than a college textbook. So, given some of my background as an art model over the years, it piqued my interest in letting people know about the fact that it's quite legitimate to be naked in front of an audience. As I've talked to friends about that, some people would go, "Gee, tell us about it." And people seem to have a lot of interest. So I kind of had an aha moment one time when I'm going, I don't want to write any more textbooks. I don't want to write any more high school workbooks. I want to have more fun doing something that's of interest to me. So that's kind of how I got started with the idea. But that was, oh, late 2016 or early 2017 when I decided, okay, I'm going to do a novel.
Did you find it, because since you've written everything was nonfiction that you've written, did you find this to be a bit more challenging to write a piece of fiction compared to writing nonfiction?
Actually, I found it in some ways easier to do the fiction piece because as I was writing, I didn't have to worry about getting the exact street name, the exact
Mm.
subway station name, the exact time of day, and so on. even though a lot of the story and the stories told by Eddie Saul, a fictional character, a lot of the story is picked up from some of my experiences in life. So by doing fiction, I didn't have to make sure that every single thing is exact. However, I will say that just about everything in the book is quite legit, quite exact, quite on target, but it might be the wrong subway stop, or it might be instead of 4 p.m., it might be 5 p.m.
Right. So would it be fair to say that this is maybe somewhat a fictional autobiographical piece? If it's a thing.
You know, Kurt, I have been asked that question over and over again.
I'm sure.
And I'll reply in two ways. One, for people who want to read about that, I hope they go to my website because I answer that question in depth in the section called Author Information. So I think it's the fourth page in my website.
What's
So
what's the title of your website? We'll put it at the end too, but go ahead and tell people what the name of your website is right now.
Sure. It's one word, no spaces, lights on close off.com. And it's not LITES, it's LIGHTES. So lights on close off.com.
That's easy enough to remember.
So the second part of that question, if you want me to go on with that, people can read about that on the website. I think it's written out so people can understand that pretty clearly, is that to me, lead me on again with that question. So I want to make sure I address it properly.
Okay. As far as whether this is autobiographical?
Yeah, I thought that's what you were asking me. So,
well, let me ask you this, because you mentioned something, and I want to make sure I ask you about this, because you said that you've done art modeling for years. When did you first start doing nude modeling?
I started that when I was a freshman as an undergraduate in college, and so that was 1964.
Wow.
And I was in need of some money. I needed a job, and I was looking at all of the typical college jobs, deliver this or work in the cafeteria, that, and so on. And I saw a job listing for models needed for the art department. And the pay was way above what all the other college jobs were. And even when I finally had the guts to go and apply for it, the pay had a difference for those who were going to pose with underwear or a bathing suit, and it was much higher pay for people who are willing to pose nude. Well, I thought, I'm going to give this a shot. And actually, I did. I was comfortable immediately. There were maybe 20, 25 of my peers in terms of age, college students in the room. And I walked in, chatted with the instructor. She gave me some pointers on what to do and took off my clothes, got on the posing stand, and that's how fast I was comfortable. There was no hesitation. I was nervous starting, but I would guess within 30 seconds, I was thinking nothing of it. I was enjoying it. So in answer to your question earlier, yeah, I guess I would consider myself an exhibitionist, but I would also say that it's kind of different in terms of what people might think about that.
And so when I think exhibitionist, and especially, I think there must be different levels of exhibitionism, because I guess in one sense, someone who's like a flasher would be considered an exhibitionist, but that's not who you are. You're somebody who worked professionally at this. So what? I know you're not a psychologist. Do you know what the difference, like, why you have someone who's a flasher who's an exhibitionist and then someone who just does this professionally? What the difference might be?
Well, I think there are different levels of exhibitionism for sure. So when people ask me, Is this an autobiography? I go, well, I've had some experiences posing nude for artists. So yes, there's some of that in me, but that doesn't mean the whole book is about me, that for sure. But also I would say that there are exhibitionists who might have fun running down the street as a streaker. Well, then I'm not sure. Are those really exhibitionists, or are they just someone who's, they're having fun, let's be exciting, let's run down the street kind of on a dare. And then there are those who might be at the far end, where they're exposing themselves on the city street to people who are unaware or who don't want to see this person naked. Then I would say we're getting into the illegal end of the story. We're getting into the totally inappropriate end of the story. But for me, I've never felt that I was doing anything inappropriate. The audience was there. The audience was willing. I was being paid for it. If a police officer walked in, I was fine.
Right.
There was nothing inappropriate. To me, people have been posing naked for art classes for thousands of years. And some of the great art in the past in our world has nude models. If you go to see the David statue in Italy, you're seeing someone who's nude, and everyone says, that is so beautiful. Does that mean that that model was an exhibitionist? Maybe, but not an exhibitionist in a negative way.
Right.
As he's posing, if he's comfortable doing that, and it's not an inappropriate interaction between the artist and the model, it's fine.
Okay, so I have a couple questions that pop into my mind. All right, let me ask you this because I don't want to forget this question. So you started posing for art classes back in 1964. Is this something that you still do?
I do.
So all these years you've been making money posing nude.
Not a lot of money. The going rate in the last couple of years has been between $15 and $25 an hour. And you only will do a class for maybe 2 or 3 hours. And it might be once a week, once every other week, that kind of thing.
Do you think that might be because nowadays it seems like everybody's willing to be nude? Like there's not the hang up that there used to be, especially back in the 60s, about being nude or posing nude. It seems like these kids nowadays are taking naked pictures of themselves and posting them on social media everywhere, where it's like a common thing nowadays.
Well, I think it's probably easier psychologically to go, okay, I'm going to walk into this room, get undressed. All of these people are going to be looking at me. They're going to be looking at me closely. They're going to be drawing details of my body. They're going to be walking around looking at me from different angles. So you have to be totally comfortable with that. And I think you're probably right suggesting that people nowadays would be more comfortable. However, it's not easy to be posing. You get into a position for 20 minutes and you don't move. And if there's a fly crawling up your leg, you don't move. You don't swat it off you. If you get a cramp in your leg or back, you don't move. You put up with the pain. So unless you're a seasoned model and you know what you're doing, you know enough to not get into a painful kind of position.
Right.
But people think, oh, you just get naked and stand there. It's not that easy.
Would I be right to say that it takes a certain amount of confidence in yourself? Because I think about if I were in your position, and I feel, pretty confident. I don't know I would be confident enough to know that not only am I getting naked in front of these people, but as you said, they're going to be like you are the center of attention and they're looking at every inch of your body from all different angles and stuff. I don't know if I would be confident enough to go, okay, I could do this.
Well, I would say that that's a problem on your end.
Yeah, exactly.
And the reason I'd say that is that artists want models, male or female, of all looks, all colors, all sizes. And they often enjoy a model who has a different body, not a standard body, who has rolls of fat, who has some blemishes, because it gives them more to look at, more to study, more to incorporate into their art. So I think that anyone who has a hang up because they don't think they're beautiful enough, that's their problem. They should get over it, because the artists appreciate everyone if they pose well. And that's the important thing. It's not how they look. Are they comfortable? Are they confident? Are they relaxed yet still? And even after a break, can they get back into the same position without a problem? All of those kinds of things go into making someone a good model for painting or drawing or sculpture.
I will say this, that it's been my experience that as you get older, now you've been doing this since you were a young kid, but I noticed that as men get older, we care less and less about what we look like and what people see, because all you have to do is go into any gym across the country and there's at least one old man in there walking around without his towel on, and he walks around like he owns the place, and he does not care what he looks like. He does not care who sees it. He just and so I was like, I guess when you get to that point, you're okay. You're like, yeah, what's the big deal? So
Yes. And I wish that were true of people of all ages and all sizes, that people shouldn't have concerns or insecurity about their looks.
well, it's obvious that from the puritanical belief system that this country was first founded on, and with us being all buttoned up to the neck with clothes on and stuff, and made to believe that nudity was bad, and that you know it's after all these years, hundreds of years, we still have that system. Even with me, I mean, I feel like I'm very open-minded about things, and I catch myself in this conundrum where I go, I believe that, for instance, you should be able to be naked in public, but then I go, but no, you shouldn't. So and I go, and I think maybe my thing is about the law. I think the laws need to change, and then I would be okay with it. I just think that if the law says don't do it, don't do it, sort of thing. So, but I tend to think that like nude beaches and things of that nature, which brings this point: is there a difference between an exhibitionist and a nudist?
Oh, great question. And I would say absolutely yes. Someone who's a nudist to me is someone who enjoys living without clothing, unless it's an extreme weather kinds of thing. It's someone who likes to go to a nude beach and other people are nude there, or a nude resort, other people are naked there. And they're just comfortable. I mean, to me, if I'm at a nude resort, swimming without a bathing suit is just so comfortable. It's very freeing and it's relaxing. However, there's very little exhibitionism that goes on there,
Right.
because everyone's nude. So I don't think an exhibitionist would be getting any kind of personal satisfaction or sexual satisfaction or kinkism or anything at a nudist place, because everyone else is nude. So an exhibitionist wants to be on exhibit. You're not on exhibit if you're surrounded by 20 or 30 or 40 naked people. So to me, those are very different. Now, people ask me that all the time. Oh, are you nudist? And I go, well, I don't like clothes, but I wear clothes when I go out. I wear clothes around the house if we're cold. I go to a naked beach, take off my clothes, but I also don't think that that has anything to do with exhibitionism. You have to have an audience to be an exhibitionist.
Okay, so you bring up a great point. All right, so being an exhibitionist is all about being observed. So, and you said something just in passing there, which I want to hit on. So, is there sexual gratification from being observed? Is so being an exhibitionist when you know that you're being observed? Is there some sort of sexual gratification for exhibitionists?
I think there are several levels of gratification. One, it's an ego boost if people want to see you. So that makes one feel good. Uh, there also could be a sexual kink or a sexual satisfaction to having an audience. And I've talked to other friends who pose and who are exhibitionists, and it runs a whole range of reactions where some go, oh, it's just fun, where some go, yeah, it's a sexual thrill for me. So it's hard to define. It's different from person to person. But I would say that at a certain level for me, yes, there is some kind of sexual satisfaction, but it's not like making love to someone. It's not like
Right.
a sexual act.
What I found what I found interesting when doing some research on this um, is that one, it's still considered a mental disorder. I found that very interesting. But number two, they say that it's very seldom ever seen in women, and I was thinking, I wonder why that is. Like, you would think it would affect, if it's a mental disorder, it would affect both sexes. So I don't know that I buy that it's a mental disorder and it can only affect one sex. It I don't know.
Well, when anyone says something about a mental disorder, I think back to the days in our country not too long ago
Right.
where someone like me who's gay was labeled as uh, having a disease, having a mental illness, needing therapy, needing intervention. So I think that rule, if you will, that statement that it's inappropriate, unhealthy, needing intervention is just an old thought that needs to go away. Someone who's an exhibitionist in a healthy way, which is how I label myself, uh, it, certainly there's no mental conflict there. There's no mental illness there. But someone who is running around in the streets and opening up their trench coat and
Right.
doing those kinds of things, which I did once at a party, but it was a Halloween party, so it was a pretty legit costume for me.
Right.
Those people might have a mental health problem, but to just label everyone who considers themselves as exhibitionists as having a mental health issue, I think that's unfair, old fashioned, inappropriate, and it needs to be reevaluated.
Yeah, because to be an exhibitionist, you don't necessarily have to be naked. I mean, if you think about it, like actors and comedians are two that come to mind right off the bat.
Yes,
That these are people who are exhibitionists in their own way, and to say that they all have a mental disorder because they like the attention. I don't know anyone who doesn't like attention, to be honest with you.
yes. And I think you're bringing up a good point because you're right. People who are on stage, even with their clothes on, they know they're being scrutinized. They know they're being looked at. They know they're being analyzed. They know they're being studied. That's a form of exhibitionism, and they do it gladly. It's part of their craft. And to me, I just think a lot of people are exhibitionists. When you appear on a podcast and you're doing Zoom and people are looking at you, you're on exhibit. So it might be very different when someone has their clothes off, when someone has their clothes on, but still it's kind of the same family.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm like you said, there's different levels, and I don't see how that can be considered a mental disorder because I'm telling you, if I think of even, I can't even think of one person who doesn't appreciate attention on them, and it might be a different level than what you seek or whatever, but still it's attention seeking, and we all appreciate it.
Well, I would add that it's interesting. All my friends know that I pose for art classes. All my friends know that over the years I've been a medical model where I've had to work naked in that role. My physician knows that. My best friends know that. Family know that. Not one person has ever said, is there something wrong with you? Implying that there's something wrong with
Right.
you. Uh, in fact, my physician just, I guess it was 2 days ago, just said, gee, Stu, I just got your book. I can't wait to read it. And he's known about what I do. He's a straight man. He's a very good physician. There's no hint that he's concerned about my mental health.
Well, I mean, again, to your credit, you were a university professor for 35 years. I don't think if there was something to be concerned about. I'm sure somebody would have noticed in that time that, oh, maybe there's something off with Stu.
Well, let me get back to that because that's a very good point. Uh, I didn't teach in the art department during those 35 years. However, sometimes, once in a while, a couple of my students who were in my courses that I was teaching happened to be art students. So my class would be over, and a half an hour later, I'd be in another building, and the student who had been in my earlier class would come up and go, "Well, what are you doing here, professor?" And my response was, "Well, I'm going to be your model for today's drawing class." And you know what was great about these college kids? Their response was, "Oh, great, no big deal." They get out their drawing pads and I'd take off my clothes, and it was a non-issue. So people across my campus knew, and no one seemed to think it was any big deal. But yet I know a lot of people out in the world think it's a big deal.
And again, I think it's that whole puritanical belief system that this country has been raised up under that makes it a big deal. I'd like to see that change for us to have more, again, to this day, because if we're talking about being fair, how is it that women cannot walk around topless? Now, like you, I'm a gay man. I don't care. It's not going to do anything for me.
Yeah.
But just out of fairness, why do they have to have a shirt on? Because in most cases, not all cases, their breasts happen to be bigger than ours. I've seen some men who have bigger breasts than women. So,
Right.
but it's okay for them to go shirtless. So it just seems like it's such an antiquated idea, that we should have gotten past that by now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the times have changed, but there are still a lot of pockets of people who are very conservative, and they're just not with that program, not with that idea. In fact, I had an experience that I'm reminded of from this. When I used to pose on the East Coast, it was very relaxed in the art schools. When you take a break, you get off the posing stand, you can walk out into the hall, get water from the water fountain. You don't have to wrap yourself up. When you're taking a break and you're standing there chatting with the students, they're over there, "Hi, Stu, what's happening?" We're just having a regular conversation. I didn't have to get dressed. When I moved to California, the first art class I posed for, I was on the posing stand. I had taken off my clothes and put them on a chair, about 2, 3 feet away, and jumped up on the posing stand. 15 or 20 minutes later, when the instructor said, "Let's take a break," I got off the posing stand and walked over to the chair, probably 2 or 3 steps. And she stopped me and she said, "Don't ever get off the posing stand again unless you are covered. Bring your shorts with you or bring a towel with you, because the only place you could be naked is on the posing stand." And I was thinking to myself, all 15 or 20 of your students have seen me naked for the last 20 minutes.
Right.
And now you're concerned that I'm going to walk over to a chair. But that was her mindset. And I have found that it's more conservative here than it was on the East Coast.
Well, I wouldn't have guessed that.
I was surprised as well.
Yeah.
Now, I shouldn't be generalizing. Maybe it was just that one experience, because I really haven't faced that over and over again. But that kind of set the tone for me, making me think it must be a bit more conservative here.
Wow. Well, I want to talk to you about your book here for a moment. So, the Lights On, Clothes Off: Confessions of an Unabashed Exhibitionist it's a fictional memoir for your main character, Eddie Saul. Now, I want to hit on a point that you just made. You said that your doctor, who's a straight man, is looking forward to reading this. So I imagine there's some erotic writings in your book, but is it meant to be an erotic type book?
It is not meant to be an erotic type book. However, there are sections in it that are erotic. So I don't know if I could define that well. In order to explain and share Eddie Saul's story, the character in the book, he goes on and talks about some of the exhibitionistic kinds of activities in which he was engaged. And he's pretty detailed. He'll talk about not just posing for art classes, but he talks about stripping in clubs. He talks about doing sex shows, those kinds of things. And he gives all the details. It's not just, oh, Eddie saying he did this. It's right. Eddie saying, this is how it happened. This is what I was thinking. This is what was happening to my body. This is what was going on as a pleasure for me. And he pulls no punches in explaining what it feels like when he would take off his pants in front of an audience and was dancing, when he was stripping and people were applauding in a club, that kind of thing. So it was never meant as an erotic book. But in answer to your question, there's a lot of eroticism in the book.
I would find it hard not to have some eroticism in a book about exhibitionism. You talk about Eddie's coming to terms with being gay and being an exhibitionist, in that he really didn't have any problem with accepting the gay part. He had more of an issue with the exhibitionist part. Is that right?
That is correct. And that's true to life for me. And that's why Eddie expressed that. So I expressed some of my thoughts through his eyes. Being gay, fortunately for me, was never a big deal. I had a supportive family. I came out when I was probably a freshman or sophomore in college. My friends knew, my parents knew. My father said to me, oh, well, okay, I just hope you find a nice doctor or lawyer to marry. I mean, that was the kind of thing he said. He didn't say it has to be a woman, it has
right
kind of thing. That was his mindset. And so for me and for Eddie, being gay and being openly gay really didn't have much of an effect on his life. It was not an issue. However, Eddie had to wrestle with the fact that he came from a religious family. He was willing to tell people that he was gay, but he was not willing to tell people that he was standing in front of a room full of artists with his clothes off. Eddie certainly was not willing to tell people he was going to bars and getting paid to dance on a bar top while naked. He was not willing to do that. I think Eddie, as he expressed, was saying it would be an embarrassment to his family. So he chose to have a very hidden part of his life for many, many years. And a lot of that was true for me as well. I didn't even tell my parents that I posed naked. They just knew that I had a college job and they were happy I was bringing in some money. They didn't know that I was getting paid more than the average college kid because I was willing to pose on a posing stand with a bunch of artists.
It's such an interesting take on it, because I would have thought, especially back in the 60s, that their son being gay would be a much bigger issue than the fact that he posed nude.
You know, I think you're right. And somehow I miss that personally. Somehow I never went through a phase of worrying about being gay. I probably by mid-college, maybe for sophomore year, it was like, this is who I am, get over it, it's no big deal, especially when I realized my parents were not uptight about it. But you're right, it was a different era. I had no role models. I mean, my role model was Liberace.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to grow up that way. And as a kid, I didn't know much about gay life. I just knew that I was different. But I never struggled with that. I think I want to knock on my wooden desk right here. I think I was very, very fortunate. That was not an issue for me. And that's why I have my character, Eddie, expressing that very clearly. The book is not a coming out book about Eddie being gay. The book is a coming out of Eddie being an exhibitionist, hiding that, shame, guilt, worry, who would see me, those kinds of things. Uh, the times when Eddie, and when you read my book, you'll see the times that Eddie was out in public. For instance, once he was posing for an opening of an art show at a museum on the East Coast, a large museum, and they were doing a show about nudes. So everyone who was coming to that show was expecting to see nude drawings on the wall, nude sculptures on platforms, nude artwork, all of those kinds of things. That was the expectation. And as hundreds of people were arriving for this event, they were being greeted at the door by some volunteers who were saying, be careful or be aware, there are nudes ahead. And everyone would chuckle, oh, we know it's a show about nudity. And then you'd walk in and there was another model, a woman who I also posed with at one of the local art schools. And she and I, during the whole evening, while people were sipping their champagne, would take turns just walking through the audience and just somewhat startling people. So to me, in those days, that was like, wow. But I guess even if that were to happen now, people would still be going, wow, it's something very different. But you have to be comfortable with it. This woman and I, who we posed together, we laughed our way through it, watching the reactions.
In the book, you use a term, you said you call it unstoppable exhibitionist. What did you mean by that?
I think that's Eddie's way of saying that because of some of his guilt, because of some of his worry about would he lose his job if people found out he's a stripper in a club, that kind of thing, he thought many times, I should stop this. And I think it's probably the same thing as someone who might be addicted to a drug or alcohol, that they might time after time say, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm putting away the bottle of bourbon, or I'm not going to smoke pot or whatever it is. And they put it aside because of health reasons, guilt, whatever reasons, but then they have to do it again. So unstoppable is really the term for Eddie did want to stop several times in his life. He was afraid of being found out. He was concerned. He was embarrassed from time to time, or concerned about being found out and then being embarrassed, but he couldn't stop. So he did it over and over again. It would always come back out. He'd always be looking for an opportunity to be an exhibitionist.
So is it like an addiction then?
I would probably say it's somewhat like that. That for someone like Eddie, who was really into doing this all the time and was feeling the guilt, he had to keep doing it in order to be a happy individual. For me, I'm pretty old. I've been doing this, and I've been posing for artists since 1964. I still do it because I like to do it. I want to do it. Fortunately for me, I don't ever have the worry of, oh no, someone might find out, and have the guilt or shame that someone else might. But I like doing it. I look for opportunities. I'll even mention to an artist friend, hey, when's your next posing group, your art group? You need someone to pose, that kind of thing, because I enjoy it. So I'm unstoppable as an art model, and Eddie was unstoppable as a much more than an art model.
Well, I think you hit on something very important, because if you enjoy doing it, I don't see why anybody should have to give up something they enjoy doing. I've talked to porn stars, and it's almost as if they feel like they have to say, "Oh, I'm getting out of this." Like, but I know porn stars who love doing porn. They just love it. And I'm thinking, why do you have to get out of an industry if you actually enjoy doing this? It's like bartending. Bartenders often feel guilty, like they're supposed to have a real job, and it's yet they make more money than most people do in their real jobs, and yet they feel like they haven't accomplished anything because everybody looks at bartending as not a real job, and so they feel like they haven't accomplished something. It's like, but this is what you're happy doing. And if it's what you're happy doing and you can make a living at it, who cares what other people think? So I think you hit the nail on the head.
Oh, that's a very good point. Who cares what other people think? But yet, a lot of people do. A lot of people are not secure about themselves. And I even, every once in a while, I'll get someone who finds out that I'm posing for artists and they'll go, "You do what?" It's almost like they're not believing it. And it might be a reflection on my age or my looks, because they have the idea that an art model has to have a perfect body and has to be 24 years old and so on. But it also might be that they think down on someone who gets nude for an audience, and that's their problem.
Right.
That's not the model's problem. That's not my problem. And don't, I think to myself, don't make your problem my problem. If you have a hang up on it, don't go pose for an art class. And if
Exactly.
you don't like to see someone naked who's posing for an art class, don't come into the art gallery.
You know, the funny thing is that usually those people who have a problem are the ones who are looking at nude magazines and things like that, and behind closed doors, and yet they'll criticize you. I once dated a porn star, and he asked me. He said, "Do you have a problem with me being a porn star?" And I go, I watch porn all the time. Why would I have a problem with you being a porn star? I would be a hypocrite if I said, "Oh, you're a porn star," and look down on you when I watch porn all the time. That would be beyond hypocritical of me to do that. So for people to look down on anyone because you pose nude and act like, "Oh, I can't believe you do that," and yet are behind their closed doors looking at Playboy or whatever magazine they might have, might be enjoying, it is extremely hypocritical of them.
Yes, no, I agree. And I just, don't even pay much attention to those comments or that attitude. I go on with my life. And if someone says, "Hey, what are you doing tomorrow?" And I say, "Oh, my husband and I can't join you because I'm posing for an art group." Uh, if they have anything negative to say, they better not say it to me,
Right.
because they're going to know that I'm unhappy, and I think they have some kind of screwed up head for thinking there's anything wrong with that. That's their hang up. So unfortunately, I have a husband who said, if I don't feel like driving, he'll drive me to an art group. Well, I have to back up and go, I haven't done live ones since COVID. They've all been virtual, they've all been online. But now that they're starting up again in person, then I'll do it again in person.
Where does one find if they want to become an exhibitionist, if they want to pose for art classes and things? How do they go about doing what you do?
There are a couple, I think, simple ways to do that. One, find a local art school or college and do a search and see who the art instructors are who teach life drawing or life or anything where a model is needed, and shoot that person an email with a nice photo of you, not a nude photo, just a photo of your face so they know who you are, and say, "Hi, I would love to pose for art classes. I'm new, I haven't done it. So I'm looking for an instructor who might be willing to tell me about how to do that." And typically they're looking for people, they want variety. And that may be one way to do it. Another one is that a very good friend of mine who now poses a lot had been asked by someone if he would pose for photos. And he said, "Okay, privately, I'll pose for photos." And he and I were talking about it. So I invited him to one of the sessions. It was part of the San Diego Gay Men's Art Group. And I said, "Come, I'm posing next week, whatever the date was. Why don't you come and check it out?" So he came and sat back there, not an artist, but he watched me posing. There was another guy posing for that evening. So he watched it. And afterwards we chatted and he said, "I think I'd love to do that." And by watching the two of us posing, he had an idea of how does it work? What do I do? Got over those little fears that have nothing to do with the nudity, but have to do with, okay, is this awkward or not? What do I do with my clothes? And those kinds of things. Now he's posing all the time just by coming in and observing. So I think those are two good avenues for someone who wants to get started. I would certainly say don't get started by running around the neighborhood naked, because unless you have a very good friend who's going to bail you out of jail, you're going to be in big trouble. So if you want to be an art model, there are avenues, very legitimate avenues to do that.
So you're available for appearances both clothed and unclothed still today, right?
I am. In fact, I've done 2 readings from my book, and the host, and I give the option to the host. I could either be dressed or sans clothing, and both of them said, "Let's do it without clothing." So while I'm reading, from my book, I just slowly disrobed, and it wasn't startling. It wasn't a sexual thing, but it made it more interesting for the people who were there. There were only maybe a dozen to 15 guys at each of these, and it helped me sell books, which is good. And so to me, that's a good way to get into some of that. Just do a reading, do it online now, and then. So that's a very good question. I do want to emphasize that if people across the country or across the world are interested in a reading, or they are interested in posing, I pose, and I know a lot of people who pose online right now. Most of us never have done that before. And at first it was a bit awkward, but I'm available, other people are available, and it's kind of fun. The last one I did was about mid-June, and there were 31 guys in the group. And I posed right from home online. Again, something I never did before COVID, but it's satisfying and it's fine.
I think now would probably be because if people want to reach out to you and have you do a reading for them, or if they want you to pose for them or whatever, have an appearance or whatever, where can they reach you?
Well, the best way is to go to my website. And on the last page of the website, it's called Contact and Chat. So it's the 5th page. And there's a form to fill out. My email is right there. So people could contact me, and that's pretty easy. Or they could just go to my email, stuauthor@gmail.com. And it's STUAUTHOR@gmail.com, and reach out that way as a direct email. If it's an appropriate person who's saying, "Hey, I want interest," or "I have interest in this, I want some information," I'll be replying immediately. If it's someone who's being inappropriate, which fortunately has not happened yet, but I've been warned that could happen,
Yes.
I know how to handle that. Delete.
Right. I'm surprised that hasn't happened yet. You're very lucky. I just had a thought in my head just because you said that, it kind of popped out of my head because again, there's a lot of that goes on, people who are just inappropriate, and so I'm glad to hear that hasn't happened thus far. So
yeah, another thing with people who live in other towns, and if they're interested in looking for a model, or they're interested in being a model for artists, do a search of the local art groups online and post yourself. Tell people you're available. It's pretty easy, I think, to break into this. You have to be comfortable, and you have to get out there. You can't just sit there and say, "Oh, I hope someone finds me." They're not going to find you. You have to go find these opportunities.
right. Would you have like an Instagram page or anything like that or social media that you promote your book and your appearance?
Yes. Facebook is just my name, which I assume is showing there. Stu Schwartz, STU space Schwartz. And that's in Facebook. So someone could friend me and chat with me. Or Stu NSD, STUINSD on Instagram, so people could find out more there. Those are 2 ways that I talk about my posing. In fact, I often will post some of the drawings and paintings that people have done of me, because I'm very proud of my posing, but I'm also astonished by the skill of the artists. It's really amazing. Even the background that you see right behind me right now, that was done by an artist I've posed for, Jaron Stokes, here in San Diego. And I just think just did a fantastic job. And he will do art like this for people as well. So there are a lot of connections out there. So if someone wants to reach Jaron, have them reach me and I'll put them together. So here I am selling for my artist friends.
That's great. I mean, that's the way it should work, honestly. And for everybody who's listening, everybody who's watching, just like with all my other shows, I'll be sure to have Stu's links to his social media, to his email, and to his website, so that you can buy his book. You can reach out to him. You can look at the art that's been done with him, so that way you can have contact with him if you would like to have so. Do you?
I'd like to add one more thing about that.
Sure.
That I hope a lot of people will check out the book, whether they do it as a paperback or an ebook. But for an author, one of the best things is when someone has read the book and they like it, to post a review. Right there, like my book's for sale on Amazon. If you're a verified purchaser of the book, there's a place on the bottom where you could say, this is what I thought of the book. And you give it 1 star if you don't like it, give it 5 stars if you do like it. Fortunately, I've had several reviewers, all 5 stars, but that's what helps authors. So I hope people won't be afraid or hesitant when they read my book. If they've liked it, please review it. If they haven't liked it, just tell me privately.
You make a great point, because I think anybody who creates something, you like feedback. You like to hear that, especially if people have enjoyed it. Because that's why you do it. You want people to enjoy what you do.
Yes.
And
yes.
so, I don't think people understand just how important that is to artists that create things that they appreciate the feedback. So.
Oh, absolutely. Every time not every time, but almost every time I read a book, if there's a place where I could write a review, even if it's only 1 sentence, like this was great, it kept me spellbound, or something like that. I'm not a professional book reviewer. I don't have to go on and write paragraphs, but every one of those little comments and those 5 or 4 stars really helps people who are the artists, who are the writers. So thanks for mentioning that.
Absolutely. Do you have any future projects planned, or any future books after this one? Or
well, I have a couple things going on. One, I'm writing a monthly column called Sans Clothing, how appropriate for me,
right.
In a magazine out of New York called Diversity Rules Magazine. So I've been doing that for several months, and I've been chatting with a couple other monthly publications about the possibility of adding me on as a columnist. So if there are any persons out there who are looking for that for their magazine or their journal, please contact me. So that's one that I'm promoting right now. I've also drafted out my next novel, and that'll probably be a couple of years until it's ready, because writing is a slow process for me. So that'll be the next writing project. And
will that be a continuation with Eddie Saul, or will this be something different?
It will be a continuation, because the current book tells Eddie's story from birth, his circumcision when he was on review by a crowd of people, as the rabbi opened up his diaper and showed his penis off to everyone before doing the circumcision. So it goes from that early time up through graduate school, and all of the things that Eddie did as an exhibitionist for that period of time. So I guess from almost birth to about 30 years old. The second book will pick up at Eddie's age of 30 and go on through his major careers and other kinds of exhibitionistic opportunities he found or created. And that book is called, so far it's a working title, I'll Be Naked at 6. And I got that title in mind because Eddie's story is that he was a naked waiter at a party, and one of the women who was setting up for the party yelled over to him, "Aren't you our waiter?" And Eddie responded, yes, I am. And she responded, aren't you supposed to be naked? And he responded, I'll be naked at 6. So that's the working title for right now.
Very cool. Well, Stu, I appreciate you being on the show. You've been a wonderful guest, um, and I think that I want to find out more about this as you go on, and especially about exhibitionism. And I'm going to look into some of the things that you talked about as far as hiring people and people who want to be hired. I think that's a great avenue for people out there who go, hey, this is something I wanted to do. So thank you for providing that. So
Oh, I actually really appreciate it. I've enjoyed chatting with you. I'm very thankful that I've had the opportunity to mention Lights On, Close Off as my book with the website of lightsoncloseoff.com, no spaces. And I welcome people to email me with questions, comments. I know you're going to list my email, stuauthor@gmail.com, but just so it's a reminder for people. But I think it's great that you are doing these interviews, getting a lot of different people on your podcast, giving everyone an opportunity to chat about things that are near and dear to them. So you are well appreciated. Thank you so much for inviting me.
thank you. But the whole point behind my podcast, as I've said from the very start, is I want to challenge people's perspectives, and I want them to look at things from a different perspective than what they're used to looking at. And that means that I have to have all types of different guests, so that guy who looks down on people who pose nude for art, if he looks at this with open eyes and a different perspective, maybe he'll go, oh, you know what? I've been closed-minded about this, and maybe I should look at this differently. So
Yes.
that's
Well
why
said.
I enjoy having people like you on the show. So,
Thank you. Yes.
well, folks, that's going to be our show for today. And again, if you're looking for a good summer read, you might want to consider Lights On, Close Off, Confessions of an Unabashed Exhibitionist. And you can find that at lightsoncloseoff.com. And you can contact Stu there as well. And we'll make sure we have all the links at the bottom, like we always do. So that way, all you got to do is click on it and you'll be right there. So thank you for joining us. And until next time, take care, be safe. We'll see you later.
Thank you.